You're good.
Good. Good morning, everyone. Bill Coleman here, as always. Thanks so much for hosting me on my trip last week. It was a great time, and it was great to be on site in your communities and give me a little more feel for your area. I think we had some great conversations in all 6 communities, and was for me very valuable. I hope it was for you as well. Bill Donahue from Vermilion County and I were chatting before a lot of people came on about the, advice for dealing with broadband providers, and as you move forward on partnerships, and that I'm glad you're getting antsy, Bill, for that kind of activity, because it's timely now. We've been doing a lot of information gathering, a lot of learning about broadband and technologies. And now, of course, the important thing is cutting the deal and moving forward on funding projects, funding programs for building programs. So that is a key part of this. And Doug is really, last week you talked about the partnerships and some of the models with Chris Mitchell, public and private partnerships and cooperatives, and what role you might take as a community. Today, Doug Dawson is going to help us with around how do we measure the feasibility of a project? What does it take to make a project financially successful over the long term? And that, of course, involves a wide range of activities in terms of understanding take rates, and Doug's going to go all through that. Doug is, I guess, all the broadband world, I'm going to say that I admire Doug the most. I've learned the most from him early on in the program. We've encouraged you to subscribe to his blog, and Pots and Pans by CCG is the name of that. And Pots and Pans, Pots is plain old telephone service, Pans is pretty amazing new stuff. And Doug is really an expert on this from way back, and has own telephone companies and ISPs. But probably for as long as I've been doing broadband consulting, he's been really at the forefront of helping communities find the right partner and the right deal for them. So Doug, I just want to again thank you as always for sharing your expertise, and turn it over to you.
All right, let me share the screen here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so I'm Doug Dawson, president of CCG Consulting. Our business has been around for 27 years. I've been in the industry now it scared me when I added it up. It's been 48 years. So I've been doing this for a while. And as Bill said, I've done a little bit of everything over the years. Worked for big ISPs, small ones, owned some. And as a consultant, I've worked for 1,200 different communities and ISPs. So what I want to talk today is about feasibility studies. And I'm going to talk about the full range of things that feasibility studies can do. Your community only may need 1 or 2 of these things. So, if you bought a full feasibility study, you potentially would buy all the things I'm describing here. But the point is that you may look at this list and go, boy, I think that's something we ought to take a look at. So you don't have to get all these services, but there are things that outsiders know how to help you with, or things that you could even tackle internally once you see what it is that, that a feasibility study can do. And a few of these items on the list you've actually already tackled as part of this Accelerate program. So let me launch into it here. We'll talk about mapping, market research, gap analysis, products and pricing, engineering estimates, what's it cost to build broadband in your community, financial analysis, funding, and a few other things. So mapping is just what it sounds like nowadays. Broadband mapping is figuring out how many people don't have broadband. We start with the fact that we have a very weird world right now where the FCC and the state broadband offices have one map. You have your GIS locations, and in many cases, the two don't overlay very well to each other. But as far as grants are going, we have to use the FCC and the state maps, and they're and you'll just see if once you dig into them, you'll just see very odd things going on. Like they will have a house located in the middle of a field, and they'll have 4 houses in a row that don't make it to their map. And so, this drives ISPs crazy. In fact, I'm helping an ISP right now who is fighting with them on an RDOF program where they're trying to make him say he's building to census blocks where they can't find any houses in the census block. It's like, guys, you got to let me off the hook for these. So it's a very weird set of dichotomy between those two maps, but it's the maps we are living with. Um, and so the beauty of these maps is the FCC maps tell you what the ISPs tell the world, that which is not necessarily the truth, but how many people can buy various speeds and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, the biggest weakness in the FCC maps is that ISPs are allowed under the FCC rules to put in their marketing speeds, not their real speeds. And so a lot of them do that. Some advertise very honestly, and others are greatly overstating the speeds that you can actually buy. And that's where we get into the real problem with these grants. So those maps may say that, in fact, in one Illinois county, we found a whole lot of a local telco claiming 100 megabit DSL in rural areas. It's like, there is no such technology. It's like, this is completely obviously not correct. But that's what was in the map. And the state broadband map started with the assumption that those were served. And then so those had to be fixed. Unfortunately, the Illinois map challenge is over as far as the BEAD grants go. So we can't get in there and try to fix that anymore. But you could still get the overall bigger FCC map fixed, which your ISPs would appreciate greatly if it turns out the locations are not just in the right place. So, um, so as part of mapping, we often, in a feasibility study, we actually often send engineers to the field, and local communities do the same thing. They send people out to look. Do these people out here really have cable service outside of town? We didn't think they did. You go out and look, and sure enough, they don't. And so sometimes a field analysis where you just go and look at the wires is an important part of determining where broadband really is and isn't. The complicated part of the mapping, which a lot of you, especially, is a big issue in Illinois, is the wireless guys, because the FCC rules say that the map should reflect customers that you can install within 10 working days of the request for service. And it's really hard to define where a wireless antenna can see and can't see. Trees block the path, hills block the path. And so, the maps that they have in the FCC coverage are sometimes greatly overstated. And other places where it's very flat and open, they could be very accurate. So, but we're finding some counties in Illinois who have massively overstated wireless coverage, which is really a concern in terms of blocking areas from getting better BEAD grants. So, but mapping's a big issue, and if you get stuck on it, there's lots of folks around who could help you if you need to go further than what you can do on your own. So, market research is basically, and a feasibility study is residential and business surveys, and I'm going to talk more about how to use surveys here on the next slide because I know that you all have done surveys. And generally, we also, when we do feasibility studies, we also interview folks in the county because that often tells us a whole lot more. The surveys are a high level. You ask them 20 questions. In an interview, you can really dig down about what's going on. In larger communities, we even do focus groups sometimes. The point is to just find out what's going on. At your level with your broadband groups, you already started with the fact that you know a whole lot about what's going on. So some of this isn't needed, but the surveys are incredibly valuable. So let me talk a little bit more about how you use surveys here. There's two kinds of surveys. So there's statistically valid surveys and there's non-statistically valid surveys. And a statistically valid survey is one where the people who take the survey are picked at random. And so that has to be done very purposefully. There's very specific ways that you can do that. And most of those surveys are done by calling people up. You can call people up. You can knock on doors and do it, but that is really hard to do because you have to literally go to every corner of the county and not miss any places. An online survey is not statistically valid because anybody can take it. And generally what happens is that in an online survey, the people who are interested in the particular topic, whether it's broadband or any other online survey, only people who are interested in that topic take it. So you get a slanted view. For instance, you can't use an online survey to find out how many people don't have broadband, because people who really don't care about broadband won't take the survey. So you will underrepresent that group. That's just called a sampling bias, and there's no way around it. And what that means is, for an online survey, you can't automatically count on using the answers if they're numerical. So you can't necessarily use that survey to say 22% of the people in my county are currently using the cable company, because your whole sample in the first place was not random. And so but you do know a lot of people use it, and that's probably the truth. But you can't pin it down to say the 22% I got in the survey is also, that's how many people use it, because it could easily be 30% or 20%. And so if you actually went out and counted them. So numbers you get out of the surveys are not, it's not a statistically valid survey, they're not reliable. Some of the numbers may be accurate, but they also may be very inaccurate, and you don't know which ones are accurate and which ones are not. But however, what an online survey is really good at is measuring, uh, how people feel about broadband. It's very good at that sort of thing. So, do people like their ISP? What don't people like about their ISP? All those kind of, are people able to do things like, can they get their homework done for the students at home? Those kind of things come out very strongly in the survey. So they're extremely valuable for that kind of stuff. You just can't fall into the bad habit of believing that the numbers are gospel, because they're not. And so as long as you don't rely strictly on percentages that come out of it. For instance, if you ask people, if I brought you a fiber network, would you buy broadband? You can't take that number to go, this is the percentage of people who would buy broadband if I built a network. It could be quite far off from the real thing. Uh, and there are ways to compensate for that. My firm has been doing surveys for 25 years, and we have a group. We've done, gosh, 1,000 telephone survey or online surveys, but we also have a group who does full-time telephone service where they call people. And sometimes we've done both in a community, and it's really interesting to see the two side by side, how different they can be. The last weakness of of any survey, both statistically valid or online, is you can't go 2 layers deep. You can say, how many do you have broadband or not? They say yes or no. So now let's say they say no, and 5% of the people say no. Then you ask those 5% why they don't have it. Your sample is no longer the 1,000 people that one of your cities have gotten to take it. It's now only 20 people answering the question. That's such a small sample that you can't believe the numbers at all. And people who interpret surveys often go to that second layer of numbers and pretend like they mean something, and they don't, only because the number of people answering those secondary questions are very small. So you have to be very careful of not over interpreting what those answers mean. If half of those people say I can't afford it, that doesn't mean that half of the people in the county or the city who don't have broadband can't afford it. So the other issue for statistically valid surveys, there's all sorts of issues. Survey bias, you have to make sure to ask questions that don't lead you to a certain answer. It's very easy if you write your own questions to get, to write a question that people just, by the way they answer, you already sort of led them into the answer. Statistically valid surveys need surprisingly few surveys. In almost every county in the state, around 370 surveys would give you an absolutely 95% reliable answer, which means if you got that many under a very valid statistical survey, then you can 95% believe that those answers are the correct answers. So you don't need 1,000 responses in a truly random survey, but you need a lot of responses if it's not random. So it's just something that it takes many years of experience, or you have to be a math idiot like me, who went and took far too many math classes to truly understand the math of using these answers in various ways. But just a warning, don't overinterpret your results, but they're still incredibly good value out of the answers. So they're always extremely useful. Um, a gap analysis is probably one of the highest things to be on your list now, because this says, we don't only have a broadband shortage. We don't only have homes that can't get broadband. We have people who can't afford broadband. We still have a lot of houses where they don't have a computer. We have plenty of houses where people might have a computer. They have no idea how to use it. And so, solving a gap analysis really looks at all of those other issues. Let's start finding out how many people don't have these sort of things. And let's, let's, let's find a way to start solving that problem. I mean, I think almost every community truly believes that the larger the percentage of people who get online, who are able to use a computer, is beneficial to the community, because everything we do is going online. I mean, I can't even make a doctor's appointment anymore without getting, 4 things online to verify and fill out a form. And, banking, doctors, you name it, insurance, every single thing you do is now online. And if you're not online, you really struggle. And every year there's more things online. So getting the whole community online is an incredibly important thing. And there's a whole lot of money coming for this. So I don't know if you've talked about the digital equity grants that are coming down both from the state and federal level. But there's your community, every community should be able to get a sizable grant to tackle these issues. And in order to do that, you need a plan. You need to have a group of local people who are ready to tackle these various issues, which would be affordability, training, and getting computers and or other devices into people's hands. And so, and there's money available for all 3 or those things, or any one of those things. The communities are going to do the best, and these grants are going to be the ones who get everybody in that community who's interested in solving these problems to file one big grant rather than have 6 little grants go out. Because that's just how you're going to win the grants, is if you do it as a group. So that's, hopefully that's something you've been talking about in the group, or you will here before you're finished, because this money just came out a few weeks ago, and there's going to be more money coming for the next 3 years. And so this has got, this is just as important as getting a connection to people's houses as teaching them how to use the connections once they get it. So um, products and pricing, it's amazing. And I never stop being amazed at 2 things. One is how much broadband prices vary even within one county. We'll find decent broadband from $50 to $150 for the similar speeds. And so, the other thing that amazes me is, and people just don't realize it, is broadband folks pay a lot more for broadband than anybody in cities do. I mean, the things that you have in the rural areas today, like hotspots and satellite service and DSL, those things at the end of the day, especially the first 2, cost you a whole lot more money than what anybody in the city is paying for cable modem service by the time that you get your full true bill. Or if for people to hold the bill down, the way you do that is you don't use it. So if you don't use those broadband products, then you don't hit the data caps, but then you're not really using your broadband. You're not streaming. You're not, you're just barely using it to stay under the data caps. And so, getting the prices down is maybe the most important product of getting better broadband in the community. You're going to be surprised that people who are paying $110 a month all of a sudden will have a $70, 300 megabit connection on fiber built out of one of these grants, and they're going to save $50 a month, and they're going to have 10 times better broadband. I mean, this is a really big deal. So pricing is important to understand your pricing. It doesn't hurt to look at the pricing in the counties or communities right around you, because you will find that amazing range. The other issue that everyone's dealing with, even after these grants, and particularly in the towns and county seats, most places in the country only have one good ISP. So when you start, we're talking about B grants for the rural folks, but the county seats, most of them have one good ISP. Some are lucky enough. Some have a cable company and somebody's built fiber. So not everybody has this problem. But I still go to whole counties. I just went to a county and did a study. This is a county with 1 million people in it, and only about 5% of them had choice of 2 ISPs. And so, most of the country doesn't have that option yet. Um, that's the next big thing that we're confronting, is people really, and that's what you're going to see. I guarantee your survey is going to say the people want a choice. I mean, there's no way that you're not going to see that in your responses. So even if they get one ISP, they would like to have some competition so that maybe they can get a better price. So that this is still a big deal. So investigating these things is something that you can do in a feasibility study. Um, the big question for every community is how much does it cost to get the solution? And the only way to do that is to have engineers look at it. I mean, you know, it's really nice to think that maybe every part of Illinois has the same cost, but they don't. The cost to build it in your community and the one that's only 30 miles away might be different by 50%. There's a couple factors that really drive the cost. One is the condition of the current poles. Some poles are just a real mess and they don't have room to add a new fiber to them. So, in that situation, uh, unfortunately, it's going to cost a whole lot of money to get on those poles. A lot of the poles will have to be replaced. If you're going to bury the fiber, there's some places in Illinois that are deep, black 16 feet deep topsoil, and you could honestly bury a fiber with a teaspoon, is the joke I've always said. And there's other places where it's just rocky, and it's just almost impossible to put fiber in the ground. And obviously, those two situations drive a tremendously different cost. There's also just a very big variance in labor costs. The closer you are to Chicago, the more it costs, and the further downstate you are, the less it costs to find a construction company. And so, I mean, that's just all those things add up to the fact that solutions cost different. The other issue that's really driving cost, and that I hope that some of you will look into, is that there's already been a lot of broadband grants awarded around the country. And the number one of these in Illinois is something called RDOF, Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. This money was given to various ISPs, a lot of them wireless, and those areas are not eligible for the new grants. But what they've done for you is very unfortunate in that the areas they're not big nice areas, they're just little dots here and there all over the county, which means what's left over is not one big area that somebody can go build a network. What's left in your county is likely pockets on the left, right, north, south of places that need broadband, and that adds to the cost too. If I went out and built the lower third of a county as one big project, that's way cheaper than if I do that same amount of construction spread in different pockets all over the county. So those things all end up mattering. And why this matters is even today, we know that in Illinois that we're still thinking that BEAD grants aren't going to be due till probably the end of the year. The state is further behind than many other states because they're still in the process of giving out their state grant money from ARPA. So they still have another round of awards to make there. And so they're talking about probably near the end of the year. So there's still a lot of time for ISPs to decide if they want to file for BEAD. And may surprise you, but a lot of them have not done this engineering. The engineering's expensive for them. Most ISPs aren't just in one county; they're in 3, 4, 5 counties, and so that's a whole lot of engineering for them to analyze. And if you do that engineering, you've actually saved them a lot of money and effort, because if someone hires us to do an engineering, we gladly hand the results of it to an ISP to say, here's what we think it costs to build, and they can look at the detail, and usually they go, yeah, that's right. So, or they have their own uh, cost numbers they know, and they can modify in 10 minutes, and now they have a good cost estimate to build. So that's really important. This is done for the ISPs. It's kind of good for the county to know too. Do I need to solve my county? Do I need 10 million or 70 million? That's kind of important to know what kind of solution is needed to get you the broadband that you're hoping to get. So also the best technology. There's some counties who are just absolute, and I'm working with one in Illinois right now who mostly is covered by a wireless company, and they go, we're going to try to find the money to build uh, fiber here, even if it's without a grant. We're going to start looking today because we think our county needs fiber, and they have a whole long list of questions. They have the kind of employers there that they think that's what people need at their houses and what the businesses need. So, making that determine, are you going to get wireless or fiber, and what's the difference between those is something you're going to want to sit at a table with an engineer and really get to understand. So I go through that today, but we have to do the whole slideshow. So um, financial analysis, not only how much does it cost to build the network, but how do you fund it? How much grants needed? How much matching are needed for an ISP to be successful? An ISP has to build a business plan that's going to work for them. And so we look at the amount of grants that are available to them and then look to see if they can actually still make a business out of what's left. Um, you know, the, there's a lot of misinformation or a lot of misinterpretation around that people think, well, you're getting all this grant money. We're just handing you free money. This is easy. But what we're finding is that even if BEAD pays for 75% of the cost, some of these places are so high cost that even paying 25% of the cost to build a network does not make a valid business plan. You can't be successful. And so it's really important for ISPs to understand that math, because you know that's how they're going to decide if they want to go for the grant. There are alternatives in BEAD to go for more than 75%. There's other grant programs around that you can get more than 75%. And so that it's really important to really understand the business plan, because nobody wants to build a grant and find out they lose money for the next 20 years on that. It was a really bad decision to take the grant. Um, so usually what we do after the engineering analysis is we turn that into a business plan just to see if it works. Like, okay, here's how much grant is available in this county. Is that going to work? In some cases, it works great. It's mostly determined on the cost of the network. If the network was affordable, it's going to work, and if the network was really expensive to build compared to other communities, it's going to be pretty rough to make it work. So um, again, it's we always in a feasibility do a funding analysis, what's available. And again, this is usually done for the ISPs. Who's lending today? Where can they go for loans? Uh, you know, what kind of loan guarantees are out there? What kind of, I call it esoteric financing, what kind of unusual financing might help them do things? So that's something that ISPs are massively interested in. And this sort of brings back the entire circle of the story. Probably 30% of a full feasibility study is for the benefit of the community. The other 70% is for the benefit of your ISPs. I mean, essentially, if you do a full feasibility study, you're handing them a grant application in a box. Here's the cost of the network. Here's how the math works for doing it. And then we also answer all the questions that they have to end up answering on a grant application. It's really a grant in a box. And it turns out that's how we've always been doing it. I've been doing feasibility studies for 20 years. We always did the same thing, but in the grant world, it happens to work for that purpose. We do feasibility studies all the time, also not for communities, but for ISPs directly. They have the same questions. Can I be successful with this? So it's the same work. So, um, and here's the other kind of things that we often get hired. Every feasibility study is different. There's no such thing as a standard feasibility study. It just depends what the community wants to know about. I've often been hired to describe the benefits of broadband, which is something that's useful for grant applications. Bill already mentioned it. How do you go about actually finding an ISP partner? What's the best way to actually make that happen? What are the trends in the industry? Uh, some counties are interested in looking at maybe doing it themselves. So they ask for an operational analysis just so they understand it. Rarely do they decide that they want to do that, but they go, well, before I say no to that, tell me more about what that might look like. Very often get asked about legal and regulatory things. People are worried that there's problems. Uh, Everybody wants a timeline. How long does it take to get this done? You know, and I'm sure you're going to be hearing about that, because even when folks win these BEAD grants, some of them will get some broadband in 2025. Some may not still get broadband to 2028. It's going to feel like forever for some of whoever's the last folks to get hooked up are going to just be not happy for quite a few more years. So, and then regional collaboration, especially back on the digital equity, there's still a lot of chance for communities to get together. I mean, if you put together a plan to get computers in every home in 3 counties, you'll have much more chance of winning the grant to do that than if you do it for one town in one county. So regional collaborations are still something that you really want to take a serious look at. Um, so that's sort of the story of broadband feasibility studies. Again, this is a full-blown do everything study. Any one of those items on there is something that you could go out and get somebody to help you with. You don't have to do all of those. If you just wanted to do one of those, there's somebody who could help you do one of those. So the fact is, these are all things that are most of these things are things that you locally don't know the answer to. And if you want to know the answer, there's folks around like my firm and others who can help you understand them. Um, so there's who I am, there's my blog, and there's my email address. Feel free to contact me afterward if you've got some questions about what we talked about today. And right now, I think, Bill, we open it up for some questions if anybody wants to ask anything about this.
Good.
Or pretty
Thanks.
much pretty much anything in broadband, because I can pretty much talk about everything on this list. So
Good. Doug, on the survey, you had a bullet that said the value of individual responses or
yes,
evaluating those. Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, I meant to mention that one. You're going to find that some people are just very bad at taking surveys. And so if you actually look at all their responses, you're gonna go, do you have broadband? No. Well, who's your ISP? Verizon. Like, wait a minute, you do. So you do have broadband. You know, what speeds are you buying? I don't know. What are you paying? 110. You know, they will answer half the questions, and the questions won't jive together. And so what we do, particularly for online surveys, uh, we will fix some of those. So if somebody says they don't have broadband, but they do have broadband, we go back and fix the box for them. Now we're not going to change their answers like do they like things or don't like things. But individuals, there's nothing wrong when the survey is for your purposes for you to fix those kind of items because you only fix things that you're absolutely sure that they didn't give you the right answer for. You don't want to put words in their mouth, but there's nothing crooked or illegal or illicit about going in and fixing very, very obvious problems like of course he has broadband. He just told me how much the speed is and how much it costs, that sort of thing. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, so it's sometimes worth just scrubbing. We call that scrubbing the data. It's absolutely allowable in the survey world to do that. So now, a phone
Yeah. And we
survey,
have,
the people on a phone survey fix them on the phone. They go, wait a minute, you said you didn't have broadband. They go, oh, yeah, I do. And then they go back and fix that one. So,
okay. So we have a great partner at the Illinois Extension, Nancy Odrago, who does that data cleaning for us and looks out for those things, which is great.
yep.
We also do in the survey, we recognize we don't have a random sample, but we put a big emphasis on kind of the fiberhood approach where people say, yes, I want broadband. Here's my name and address and phone number and email. How would you use
Well,
that?
again, now you're down to the individual responses. I've just now developed a list of email addresses of people who are interested in getting broadband. That you can rely on 100% because they told you I would like to get better broadband. That's a that's a that's a lock. I mean, you've got that one nailed. So yes, that's another way to use the individual responses. It's also a good way to recruit people to be volunteers when it's time to go out and you know. We also often ask them, "Can I share this if we get an ISP building fiber? Can I share that response with them?" Because they would love to know how many people are already on the sign-up list, right? So yeah, absolutely, that's valuable.
Good. And then we also ask a narrative question. Tell us your broadband story. And I think
Yes.
our record is 80 pages of comments that we accumulated, I think, in Peoria County. So that was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of great stories.
Well, and usually a few of those have to be edited for public consumption. Yes,
Yes, if you sort by alphabetical.
we ask those questions too because that's almost like a mini survey, and it's like they regardless of how they answer the other questions, that's when you find out they go. We may not have asked a question that led them to tell you their biggest frustration, and they may say, "My brother was out for 5 minutes 10 times a day." Now that's the first time I learned that because I didn't have a question that was that specific, right? So there's some really interesting things found out in that part of it. So there's also people who just gripe, but
So good. Before the session started, Bill Donahue from Vermilion County, they're talking with broadband providers now and trying to sort through you know, who's the best partner. Some people are, yeah, the providers, but maybe you don't want them. Other people are saying, well, maybe, but that's the one you want. How do you help a community manage that process? What are the key things you look at to measure the fit?
Communities have a lot of power in the B grants in Illinois. There's 3 different scoring metrics in the grant process that give you power. One is uh, giving a letter of support gets them actual grant points. If you happen to also give them a local grant, that gives them grant points. And finally, if they've participated in this process that you're doing right now, that gives them some grant points. And so, um, at the end of the day, your power is to give or not give that letter of credit. And if your county's going to give some ARPA funding out, which is still not too late to do that, and there's actually I'm working with several counties in Illinois are still working on that. Um, that is the way to get it done right. So even if you're only going to give a letter of credit, what I'm having counties do is they're mailing out a questionnaire to all the ISPs and say, answer the following 20 questions, because we're going to decide who we're going to give letters of recommendation to for the grant. So, and so then you interview them. You want to map them. You want to make sure that somebody's covering all parts of the county. We just did a county in Wisconsin where all the ISPs wanted to do the southern half and nobody wanted to do the northern half. So now we know we got a problem. So now we start calling back up and go, could we talk you into going after the bee in the north? I mean, you don't even know you have that problem until they answer your questions, right? So, um, so you want to start talking to them, but you want to do it in a way that you can compare the answers between all of them. So the easiest way to do that is either very informal process, but we usually use what's called an RFI. It's a request for information. It's not a purchasing document, so it doesn't have all the rules of RFP, but it gets them all answering the same questions. And you say, if you want a bead letter of support out of me, you have to answer this. So, and they will, and they usually all respond to it. Now I know who's planning to do what. A lot of them are going to ask you to keep those questions private. So, you don't want to tell other people what they're planning. So you have to honor that request, but what allows you want to be able to put them side by side to decide who you want to support. And you can support anybody for any reason. You could just I'm supporting fiber over wireless. I'm supporting big company over little company. There's no wrong choice. It's whatever your community feels is the right answer for you. There's no wrong choice. And so it's like, but you need to do it. If you give everybody a letter of credit, then there's no benefit at the grant office because they all have exactly the same points. Not I say letter of credit, it's letter of recommendation. So if you give that to everybody, then the grant office doesn't know who you want. The grant office really wants to hopefully support who you support. They really do want to do that. So this is your way to show them who you support. So get them to answer things, all the ISPs to answer things in the same way, however you want to go about doing that. I mean, you could just do it by interviews. It's way better to have them actually send you a piece of paper. So you're on mute, Bill.
Your take on RDOF defaults. We've got a lot of rural Illinois communities with that as
well, there hasn't been
challenge.
any recent defaults. We're all hoping there will be defaults in a lot of cases. But again, I'm working with a county in Wisconsin who just found out a large chunk of the county got defaulted 2 Fridays ago. So they're in a panic all of a sudden because they've already gone out and awarded RDOF or ARPA awards to ISPs, and now they go, what do we do about this new area? So a couple things about that. One is what I just told them yesterday. The state broadband office may not put those places into BEAD. They're not obligated to take those into BEAD, so they have to make that big decision. And in Wisconsin, I think they got 20 or 30,000 locations dumped back on the state, so they may not take them. But that's now a pocket of people. If they default, they're not going to have a broadband solution, and if BEAD doesn't take care of them, what are we going to do? I mean, it's a definite dilemma. There's no recent big defaults in Illinois, but you never know because the industry's having a lot of talk. There's a whole lot of people apparently who would like to default. So, I mean, Charter just did it, but maybe we'll see 6 more. Who knows, right? So,
Doug, there's a request for that RFI. Would you share that?
Well, you have to kind of tailor it to each community because the questions you want to ask are very specific to you. You ask the 10 questions you care about. You would use your normal RFP form, and then in the section where you go, here's what I want, you ask them 10 questions. So, I mean, what 10 questions would you like to know? No two I've ever done have the same questions because it's
Okay.
basically, it's what you're learning here in this program. What you decide is the 10 things you most would like to hear from them about. You know, obviously, you'd like, are you going to file for BEAD would be a good one. Can you give me a map? Will you give me a map of where you're going to file? And after that, I don't, what's important to you? Prices are important. Is speeds important? Do they have a business office in the county? Every community has a different list of what they think is important. So
Yeah, timeline would be big, right?
timeline would be big. Yep. Yep. So,
Good. Yeah,
yeah,
we've talked.
yeah.
Good. I appreciate that. Um, what's your take on, we hear like the NTCA chant is BEAD is too complicated. The
It is,
smaller providers were not going to
it
apply.
is too complicated.
I I agree. I certainly agree with that. I would have already had the money in the hands of the states like 2 years ago and said,
Yes.
whatever you're doing now, just keep doing it. Use
Right.
this, and we'll see how you do it and see if you're going to get any more money.
Right.
And just that would have been I guess that's why I'm not qualified for the federal government. But are people going to apply for the BEAD? Are they going to line up for it? Is it going to be competitive?
One of the states, which I won't mention, all the telcos got together and have all decided they're not going to apply. And I think the broadband office is going to be shocked. So, the chances are somebody's going to apply, and it's in most places, if none of the telcos or cable companies apply, it'll be wireless guys or somebody else. Somebody's going to apply in most places. In every county, there's some little remote pockets that nobody may ask for because it's just too hard to get to them. And so, um, it's going to be and that's a challenge for the grant office to get those things all covered. So, uh, we just did one county where 3 or 4 different ISPs all said they were going to cover the whole thing. The county doesn't quite know what to do with that response. They're like, "This is great. How do I pick one of them?" That's not normal. That's not a normal response. So, normally it's more like the one I told you about Wisconsin, where the ISPs only want to go to the south where there's quite a few people, and not to the north where there's not very many people. So, that that's the goal for the county, I say county because some of your cities, the goal is in your region to get everybody covered. I mean, that's your goal. We don't want to let BEAD go by and only get a half solution. That would be dreadful because there's not going to be a follow up for a while. So,
and that would be in your 10 questions when you say which areas are you going to cover, and you have open areas to say, well, that's all fine, but unless you cover that other township,
yeah,
you're not getting our letter.
no, and that's part of negotiation. You call them in, you go, look, if you want to get a letter from me, you got to pick up this area next door, and they may tell you to go away, but at least you should try that. You should definitely try to. This is a negotiation. Your letter of recommendation has value to them, and it's worth asking for what you want. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but that's the nature of negotiation, right? So, but we've seen ISPs change their plans because that's what it took to get. The way to really change their plan is to give them a grant too. That'll really get their attention if you're going to give them some money. So, and you don't have to give them a fortune. I mean, there's a whole lot of counties who only have a grant program of 400,000 or 800,000 for the whole county. But the fact is, even giving out $100,000 grant to an ISP gets their attention because it's real money. So, yeah.
So, Doug, can you give the folks an idea of what a full feasibility study would cost for a rural county? And I know each one is different. And then maybe and how much of that is a survey that you would usually do?
It ranges anywhere from 50 to 100,000, and the real difference of that is the engineering, and that goes by how many places you have that we would have to study. There are still people hiring us to study the whole county because they go, we want to know about getting fiber to our cities too. So those are going to cost more than if I only study the rural area. And so that's the biggest cost determinant. The surveys, I mean, a small county who doesn't have many places to study, $50,000 range, the survey is probably 6,000 of that or something. So yeah,
Okay. All right. I think that's just valuable.
yeah.
And ideally, at the end of our program, people have their partner. The feasibility work is assumed, especially the engineering and the pro forma is assumed by the ISP. Do you have have you seen communities that if they don't have somebody like you, that they demand kind of to see the pro forma so they can really get their local CPA or find their county
Well,
finance
I've
person
seen
to
plenty
look at
ask
that?
for it. I've seen many ask for it. I've seen almost no ISPs willing to share that. They have no obligation to give people that. So now
Okay.
you get a lot more power to ask for that if you're going to actually give them a grant. That's the way to get them to do that. It's like, I'm going to give you money. I got to see that what you're planning to do makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then they might share it with you. The bigger the ISP, the harder it is to get that out of them. The little guys, little co-op might go, heck yeah, come into I won't give you a copy to take, but come in the desk, I'll put it on the screen. You can look at it all day. So, so they will, the smaller the guy is, the more likely they would be to share that with you. So, or
Okay.
you'll find out they don't really have one. That's a little scary. So some of them
Here's a question.
they fly by the seat of their pants sometimes. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, this my granddaddy did it this way, so maybe I'll
right.
do it that way too.
Yeah.
So the any other specific strategies to deal with the open areas versus dense populations other than bundling dense versus open areas? Let's say in a large, wide, uncovered areas, both there's groups in our towns in our sample here that even the towns have kind of mediocre service. So
And that's the problem. They're not going to get covered by BEAD. And that's why my one slide had the word competition on it. Even after BEAD is a word in your county, those towns aren't getting fiber unless you already know someone who's just going to do it out of their own pocket. So the second you're finished these committees with BEAD, you turn around and go, now how do we get fiber in the towns? Because otherwise you're going to end up with this really weird network where 4 years from now, when all the BEAD's done, the farms have fiber and the towns have mediocre broadband. And that's not what you want in your county because every county has plans for all of their public services to be concentrated where people live. And all of a sudden, people are going to move where the broadband is. It's like, whoa, we didn't want to do trash collection out there. Now our schools are out of balance. I mean, counties like people to be at the county seat, right? Um, so that's the next thing to do. You're not done until your whole county has good broadband. So, but getting BEAD is first. So this is obviously where you put your attention. But turn around when you're done, start figuring out how to get those towns done. Because in the long run, you're going to have a problem if they have poor broadband. And there's still towns who have very poor broadband who won't get anything out of this. So yeah.
So I want to make a pitch for the American Association for Public Broadband. Just published a handbook that I'm the author of with a lot of help from a lot of folks. And there's a webinar series that you go to aapb.co, I think it is. Yeah. There's a webinar series. There you go. And maybe Reed can put the not only the document but the registration link in the chat for that. A couple more of those. What's your take now on the future of public broadband, especially in county seat towns?
There's still not a whole lot of communities that are willing to tackle that. I mean, after all these years of all the talk about it, there's maybe 150 communities who have actually built fiber to everybody. So it's not that popular. People want partners. They want an ISP to bring it. I mean, that's what they really want. And that's doable. They just have to get organized and figure out how to get them there. Um, and so but there are communities that want. Every year there's another 5 or 10 who are getting into the business, but that's not going to cover the 30,000 towns in the U.S. at any. That's the 300-year broadband plan. So,
Mm-hmm. When
But
I'd
if
say
you're
reliability is the
if your city is interested in it, it's doable, and it usually is financially viable. It's very politically risky, and it's just an uphill battle to talk everybody into it. People are very leery about local governments doing that, but if the broadband's poor enough, I mean, every community's done it is they've done it because they just didn't like their broadband. I mean, that's the only reason anyone has done it. So if no one else wants to do it, that's your last fallback position. So yeah, there's still
good.
lots of states who I live in one of them where the powers to be, it's almost impossible for a city in my state, North Carolina, to do it. So it's not easy everywhere. That's for sure. So
We here in Minnesota, Carver County, probably one of the most conservative suburban, exurban kind of counties. Now they're all in on public broadband, and it's a
right,
real mind bender from where
yes.
does that fit on the uh, political scale? But it's a
Well,
hey, they want it done, they're going to do it themselves.
one thing I've found is broadband is not partisan. It's one of the few issues that it's not really all that partisan. Everybody wants their community to have better broadband, doesn't matter what party you're from. So you just don't see that getting in the way very often. So
Good deal. Any other questions for Doug? In terms of timing, if we do not make the current funding cutoff, July, as I understand it, is the funding still going to be available? Bill, that funding, the July one is kind of, I think, the last of the Illinois dollars from the state dollars. They
yeah,
have not yet announced at all, and maybe somebody else from Illinois Broadband Lab could jump in as to the BEAD timing. As you know, we just have a turnover in our state director in Illinois, Doug.
yes, I heard that. Yeah, yesterday. Uh-huh.
Yeah, good. Anyone willing to take a leap?
Again, I mean, I talk to
Maybe not.
folks in Illinois all the time, and I've heard that they probably won't have BEAD grants due to the end of the year. So I mean, it's pretty hard for them to beat that timeline. So yeah,
Yeah, it's going to be a 3 phases, I know,
right,
of
right.
dollars in Illinois.
So there's still
So
quite a bit
good,
of time
and
left.
we'll have
Yeah,
the Office of Broadband on in a week or so to go through all those details.
there you go.
Doug, I want to thank you. Let's see if I got one more. Nope, that's good. I want to thank you again for your participation in these today in particular, and then just generally so helpful to the community. So your perspective and experience. There's a lot of folks out there talking, but I don't think anyone has a range of experience of projects and ISPs and communities that you do. So I appreciate your willingness to share.
Well, thank you. And I just noticed you have 40 participants today. This is very well attended. That's good to see. So
Yeah, and we have people meeting in committees in conference rooms too. So there's, I bet we have 80 people.
very nice, very nice. Well, good to meet
Yeah.
you all virtually. So I didn't get to see all your faces, but
Uh-huh.
all right. Well, thank you, Bill, as always. So I'll talk to you later.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Good. Let's as we think about the breakout rooms, Reed's going to open those up pretty soon. But I just want to encourage folks to continue to press for the surveys. We've got about another week or so, a week and a half to make that happen. So keep chunking those out, especially those with the lower counts, and make one last push. And then again, probably now most important is those provider discussions. You know, if you think about the idea, oh, let's formalize this a little bit. Let's do an RFI. I know you guys have been doing interviews, you know, and I think that'd be a great, now that you know them, and you send them this RFI, they're probably pretty likely to respond to it. I think Doug's, you know, suggestion of essentially the hammer of, you know, companies that fail to respond to this questionnaire will not be considered for BEAD letters of support. I think that's an incredible motivator for them. And what kind of answers they give you, of course, is going to be up to them. But I think it's a good way to go to formalize that process a little bit, especially with this letter being so important for their application, letter of support. I think it's a great way to show that you've gone through a process in picking your provider partners. Does anyone have any questions? I know Vermilion wants me to jump into their room, and I will do that.
Just as I'm opening the rooms, I spoke to Nancy this morning, and just a quick note from her on the survey close. You don't need to stress it to your counties that it's a close date. It is the last date that the responses that are collected will be included in Nancy's analysis. But there's no problem with you leaving your survey open to collect additional responses, to collect more addresses. If you find that your coverage map wasn't as robust as you would like it, you can keep that open throughout the summer. Nancy's open to that. And even she mentioned being open to running a subsequent round of analysis for counties that feel that would be of value to them. So just if you're feeling stressed about the close date, you can still collect responses past the date. They just won't be included in the report that Nancy delivers to you at the end of the program.
Great clarification, and very helpful from Nancy's point of view, or the assistance to each of the communities. So good news.
And with that, I will open the rooms, and let me know if you're having trouble getting in, and we'll help you out.
So Reed, once you've heard Doug 5 times, you know everything.